And so welcome, colleagues. Today we are starting our final webinar, the seventh peer learning webinar of the project Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework. Welcome, greetings to all of you. So my name is Eduarda Castelbranco, you will know me. I work as thematic content coordinator of the project Developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework. The project ran until 2022 under the wider umbrella of the Africa-EU partnership. You have the possibility to have interpretation. Please choose your interpretation channel in the bottom of your screen in Portuguese and French. We will have today presentations in the 3 languages, so it's quite important that you choose the language of your preference. You have all received the agenda and also the link to the presentations. All presentations are already uploaded. You also have in the website the report on the South African National Qualifications Framework that was produced by the ACQF project under the mapping study. So as you all know, for a smooth interaction today, let us then try to mute the microphones. You can use the chat box to introduce yourselves, to write your questions, comments. Of course, you can, as I said earlier, choose the language of your preference. It's a button in shape of a globe. Today we have now a very short introduction. So welcome to all participants. This is just a screenshot of our last webinar, the end of the webinar, as always. So very briefly, we will have just recalling you all about the agenda of today, then the recap of main learnings from the 6th peer learning webinar, very, very quickly. Of course, then the introduction of the 3 cases of today, very interesting cases. And then to finalize this first session, we have a video animation which is an overview of the 7 peer learning webinars so far. So the agenda of today includes 3 main cases, as well as to conclude a panel to synthesize the most important learnings, takeaways, and also some proposals for the way forward. So we will have South Africa. As you know, South Africa has over 2 decades of experience of the National Qualifications Framework. We will have then Sierra Leone, which is one of the youngest initiatives. Sierra Leone started developing its National Qualifications Framework. And Sierra Leone will actually conclude the sharing of African experiences in this series of peer learning webinars. So Sierra Leone, you will have this big honor to be the last to present African experiences. Then we move to a 3rd case, which is a completely different experience, and it is something very innovative, and I know also very big interest for Africa, which are the digital credentials. So colleagues from the European Commission, Unit Skills and Qualifications, will present Europass digital credentials. So this will be then the very last presentation of our webinar. And we move immediately to the panel debate. And in the panel, we will have 8 panelists presenting their responses to those 2 questions we had proposed on the agenda. And finally, conclusions and closure. This is the journey so far of these peer learning webinars. Started on the 2nd of July. We started in Kenya, and we will conclude the journey, as I said earlier, in Freetown, in Sierra Leone. We had so far, we will have altogether then 22 cases presented, discussed at these 7 webinars. Of them, 17 are national qualifications frameworks and 5 regional qualifications frameworks. So we are now really at the very last step of this first series of peer learning webinars dedicated to issues, experiences of qualifications frameworks. This time, because we are finalizing our journey, I will not recall the context, the policy context of the African Continental Qualifications Framework. We have been discussing this at each of our webinars so far. But you all know then that the African Continental Qualifications Framework is an initiative of the African Union. It is closely related with the ecosystem of Agenda 2063. The project currently until 2022 is supporting the African Union developing the policy technical document of the African Continental Qualifications Framework, supported by an action plan and a number of tools. So let us then just quickly move to a recap of the 4 case studies of the previous peer learning webinar, the 6th, that took place just a week ago. Since this is a learning exercise, we always like to just recall very briefly the most important takeaways of the previous session. So as you all remember, we had 2 national qualifications frameworks presenting and 2 regional qualifications frameworks. So we had Zambia, Mrs. Miriam Chiaba, the director of and CEO of ZAQA, Zambia Qualifications Authority. We had then for Cabo Verde, Mr. Amilcar Mendes, who is the head of technical unit of the coordination unit of the national qualification system. So, and then 2 African regional qualifications frameworks. So the first was presented by Mrs. Colleen Javta. She is going also to be today on stage, presenting together with Julie Reddy the South African qualifications framework and the East African qualifications framework for higher education, presented by Dr. James Joey, Principal Education Officer. So in the case of the Zambia qualifications framework, as you all remember, our speaker very in detail, very comprehensively explained, presented the objectives, the structure of the framework, the current ongoing reform of the Zambia qualifications framework, the most important elements and governance of quality assurance of the 3 sub-frameworks. For the first time in these webinars, we heard about e-certificates. So this was the case of Zambia. Today, we will have 2 additional experiences of e-certificates. So one in the case of South Africa and the other one in the case of Europass. Miriam also told us about the experience of RPL and gave us also information about COVID-19, how the country reacted and responded to the effects and the steps forward. In the presentation of Cabo Verde, we had very detailed, comprehensive information on the objectives, the legal framework, the qualifications in the framework, qualifications catalog, also the ambition to align, to cooperate with other frameworks, including with the European Qualifications Framework, and naturally with the framework in the ECOWAS region to which Cabo Verde belongs. Cabo Verde National Qualifications Framework is a framework of 8 levels, unlike the Zambian, which has 10. So Cabo Verde Qualifications Framework has already 10 years of experience and entered in the new stage already of a revised qualifications framework and its various instruments. In the case of the two regional qualifications frameworks, I think we had very insightful information on the regional objectives of integration and cooperation. We heard and we saw a very impressive, let's say, picture of the history, all the milestones of SADC qualifications framework. The implementation programs, the 6 implementation programs, the alignment criteria, for example, the various tools that support implementation of SADC qualifications framework, and also information on the responses to the COVID-19 crisis. In the case of East Africa qualifications framework, which is a different framework, differs from SADC qualifications framework, the region is also different. We had also very substantial information, for example, on the strong emphasis on integration and on the fact that the region already created a common higher education area declared by the Summit of Heads of State in 2017. Dr. James also shared with us his views, his views on the effects as well as the silver linings, if we can say, of COVID-19. So, meaning in every crisis there is an opportunity, and he explained them very well. I will not go at all into details because you have the presentations, and in fact, what I would like just to do is to encourage you to go to the web pages of this webinar number 6 and take a look at all these presentations. They are so well prepared by your peers, by your colleagues from the different countries for you. So I would like really to invite you all to take a moment and look at all these experiences, and also, let's say, appreciate the effort put into sharing all this knowledge, all this experience that is so fundamental for all countries. Sharing is fundamental. So this is just an overview again of Zambia National Qualifications Framework, the most important elements, the importance of the framework, the reasons why the framework is being reviewed for several improvements related with, for example, recognizing qualifications that are not yet catered for, or the implementation of credit accumulation and transfer system, and streamlining quality assurance, review of and recognition of the appropriate authorities. This is the new design, let's say, the new shape, shape of the Zambia Qualifications Framework. This is also a novelty that was shared with us. It has just appeared, and you have it also in the presentation that is on the website. As I said, the example of e-certificate. Then I will not go into detail on the on Cabo Verde National Qualifications Framework, since I already said the most important elements. But again, as you can see, the goals of the NQF are quite common across many countries. And here we immediately see similarities with the goals of the Zambian National Qualifications Framework, which are integration of the subsystems of education and training, access, mobility, and progression. So for inclusion of the population, validation of non-formal and informal learning, transparency, comparability, and close cooperation with other frameworks. Amilcar also shared with us the challenges for the framework in Cabo Verde in the way forward. And perhaps one of the interesting statements on these challenges is this idea that the country has to develop a national pact involving the different subsystems on the NQF and its link with other frameworks. From the presentation of Colleen, which was a very rich and insightful one, I would like just to point to some important elements related with all these guidance and reference materials that SADC Qualifications Framework develops for the member states. And here you have just a few examples. For example, the main booklet of the framework, but then also those thematic reference materials such as guidelines for recognition of non-formal and informal learning in the SADC region. This is all quite interesting, and everybody can learn from these materials as well. For those who are interested in more details about the East African Qualifications Framework for Higher Education, please have a look at this very substantive and just one important document. It is also very informative, and you have the link on the screen. And we have a number of member states of EAC, of the East Africa community today with us. For example, Burundi is here with us. Welcome. Madame Anna Gazogo. Of course, I will not go into details, but I would like also just to point to the fact that throughout this journey of 7 webinars, and starting from the 3rd, all countries have been sharing with us elements of their responses to the COVID-19 crisis. And here just a few examples. I think it's also quite interesting to see how different countries reacted, how different countries are moving forward with digitalization, with increased flexibility of their systems, review of procedures to adapt to the new normal. The same, just also a number of examples from other webinars, the 6th as well. And today, Sierra Leone is also going to share with us the COVID-19 response. Naturally, we cannot not acknowledge our discussants, their ideas, their views, their opinions, and their summaries, their brilliant syntheses have been very interesting in a number of our webinars. So Dr. Jeffrey Mukora from Mozambique, Dr. Mohamed Slassi from Morocco, Professor Kuzvinetsa Tsimbo from Zimbabwe, Mr. Joe Samuels, and Professor Mamadou Sarr from Senegal. The 3 case studies today, as I already said, will be presented by the first one on the South Africa Qualifications Framework and SAQA. And as you can see in the image, I thought it would be nice to just recall that South Africa is the world champion of rugby, still reigning world champion. It was such a brilliant achievement. Dr. Julie Reddy, acting CEO of SAQA, and Mrs. Colleen Jafta, Director for International Liaison, are going to share with us the South African experience. Then we move to Freetown, Sierra Leone, and Mr. Mohamed Jallo, Director of NCTVA, is also going to share with us the journey, the development of the National Qualifications Framework, the first steps. And you will pinpoint also very important contextual elements, including historical elements that led to the current situation. And finally, our colleagues Denis and Ildiko from the European Commission, as I said earlier, will tell us about the Europass digital credentials. And now I would like to invite my colleague Erika to please start showing the video. And right after the video that lasts less than 4 minutes, we move immediately to session 2, South African Qualifications Framework. Please, thank you. Thank you very much. This video is the result of our joint journey together with all of you. I'd like then to say that the video, of course, will be available. You can also use it when you do any presentations. You can refer to it, as you can refer to any of the materials that have been gathered. This is all knowledge that was created together, and probably this is an important, let's say, achievement and outcome of this journey so far. And now I would like to invite dear Sakwa, please, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you for the excellent introduction to our session. I also want to thank everybody associated with the ACQF webinar learning series for this opportunity and privilege for SAQA to present on the South African NQF. And to all the esteemed colleagues working in this global space, I look forward to us, sharing the South African experience and hearing from you your insights and observation. This work is a collective work of the management team at SAQA and will be presented by me and Colleen Jafta. I am the acting CEO, but I'm very pleased to see that Joe Samuels, the former CEO of SAQA and the backbone and champion of the South African NQF, is also here. We owe a lot to him, and I'm glad he's in the room today. You mentioned, Eduardo, about our South African rugby champions. I want to say that maybe our celebration has been superseded by the Jerusalema song, which has brought hope and renewal to the world. So South Africa has bursts of brilliance. And, I think that's one of those where in very critical challenges times, we hopefully can come on board and offer something to the world. With that, I'll move on. I will do part of the presentation and Colleen will come in with the others. So it's a very high level presentation. We will look at the background to the South African NQF and we'll refer to it as the SA NQF. We will try to explain what it is, what its key features are, and what are the key lessons we have learned in over 20 years of implementing this NQF. So first I want to start off with the key milestones in terms of the South African NQF. I just want to say that you will note that the South African NQF came about through the South African Qualifications Authority Act back in 1995. And I must point out, it was the first piece of transformative legislation in a new democratic South Africa. So it showed what the democratic government post-apartheid thought of education, training and development transformation in the country, in what high regard they held it. SAQA was then established as the structure that would be the custodian of the National Qualifications Framework for South Africa and was established in 1996. Then in 1998, an 8-level NQF was published. So the decision was made to go with an 8-level NQF. We subsequently replaced that based on lessons we have learned. I'm just noting some other reviews and teams just to say that the South African NQF is not, it's based on an improvement model. It's based on lessons learned. It's not cast in stone. It is one that is very much alive and, we continuously look to learn and advance and improve it. So there was a study team review on its implementation. Those are the different dates. At that point, initially, it was under a Ministry of Education, which subsequently in 2010, our one education ministry got divided into two ministries of education, higher education and basic education. So those were established under the President Zuma, under his presidency in 2010. But in 2008, the NQF Act was implemented, and it was a very important piece of legislation. And key outcomes of that was that 8-level NQF was replaced with a 10-level NQF to address issues of differentiation across the levels, especially in the higher levels, levels 7, 8. 3 autonomous quality councils were established through this act, and to deal with 3 discrete and separate sub-frameworks to the act. The general and further education sub-framework, which is levels 1 to 4. The higher education sub-framework, which is 5 to 10, and the occupational sub-framework. And each of these quality councils were responsible for publishing their qualification types. The legislation also clarified roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities of the various NQF-related entities. And then the other important date to note in this timeline is in 2012, 2013, the Minister of Higher Education, now called Higher Education and Training, or Higher Education, Science and Technology, we've gone through various iterations, determined the sub-frameworks. I think it was one of the most instrumental pieces of legislation in the space. In 2014, all the sub-frameworks published their policies. The Minister of Education, through his Department of Higher Education and Training, then published his white paper on post-school education and training. And basically, what this did was to reinforce issues of access, redress, key principles, but also about an integrated framework, articulation across the sub-frameworks, parity of esteem, simplification of the sub-framework. So all of those became key principles. In 2019, the Act was amended to entrench SAQA's role in promoting genuine qualifications and to bring legislative recourse for people who claim qualifications they have not achieved legally, and some other amendments to the Act. Next one, Colleen. Okay, so what exactly is the South African NQF? So in terms of the NQF legislation, it is a comprehensive, integrated framework which is improved, which must be approved by the Minister of Higher Education and Training. It is a classification system. It publishes quality assured national qualification. It is not a referencing model. It is a register of all national qualifications offered in the country, and it needs to articulate across the sub-frameworks, horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. A big ask, but that's what we aspire to do. So it is a transparent framework, and it unlocks access, redress, and recognition, which are key principles in the South African Constitution. Next one. Okay, so as I've indicated before, it's a single integrated framework. The emphasis is on standards and quality to promote access, mobility, and progression, to promote the personal, social, and economic development of lifelong learners in the nation. And I think that's a very important principle, because we do find in the occupational space that there is some push to write job descriptions rather than occupational qualifications that address the holistic needs of learners. And also their principles of redress and transparency are very important in our framework. Next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, it's, we adopt an integrated approach. The whole concept and of quality assurance is embedded in the NQF. It's premised on learning outcomes, level descriptors, and learning pathways with, the principle of unblocking the blockages. And all of these are key principles embedded in the South African NQF. Now, South Africa, ACQF, as the custodian of the NQF, working together with its quality councils, must develop and maintain an integrated and transparent framework for recognizing learning achievements, formal, non-formal, and informal learning, and promoting lifelong learning for for all people who live in South Africa, to ensure that South African qualifications meet appropriate criteria and are internationally comparable, and to ensure that the South African qualifications are of acceptable quality and meet specified standards. So this is what our framework looks like, very similar to the Zambian qualifications framework, 10 levels. So our general and further education, the schooling, is the ones in blue, levels 1 to 4. The Council for Higher Education from 5 to 10 is our higher education space, and our occupational sub-framework straddles levels 1 to levels 8 at the moment. ACQF can advise the minister to change it, but at this point, that is what is most useful. The different the different qualification types are specified in this framework. And you will see those 3 columns in green. We have not left out adult basic education and training, and our history, which has left a lot of people without recognized qualifications and competencies. So those are our adult basic education and training levels 1 to 3, to enable people to have a learning pathway onto the NQF framework. The 3 custodians are the quality councils. Thank you, Colleen. Okay, this just provides you with a bit of a snapshot of the broader space and the context in which the South African NQF is being implemented in South Africa. It shows the key role players responsible for advancing and implementing the South African national qualifications frameworks, and other entities, the providers. But basically, as I mentioned, we have 2 ministries in this space, 3 quality councils. ACQF is the authority and the custodian of the NQF and responsible for registering all national qualifications that are recommended by the 3 quality councils. And we provide a number of other services. It's a relational construct, and we have a relational relationship with all these different entities in this space. Next one. Okay, so as I said, the South African NQF and ACQF operates under a legal mandate. We have a number of policies. We work in a very expansive policy landscape. The first one, recognition of prior learning, is not a new concept in South Africa. The first policy was developed in 2002. It's gone through a number of reviews, reiteration, realignments, improvements, and so it's been republished 6 times. Well, it's been published 6 times, most recently in 2019. And recognition for prior learning is for access and for credit and advancement. we have, you know, I mentioned in the previous slide that we have these NQF, various NQF structures who need to work together. So we have a system of collaboration that specifies how we work together. It also has a dispute resolution if we don't agree to work together. And we have the CEOs of all entities that meet and discuss issues of mutual interest and benefit. And we assess and evaluate our work, and we, on a quarterly basis, report to the Minister of the progress that we have made. We've got the NQF implementation framework, which comes out of the system of collaboration. A key underpinning tenet of the South African NQF is our level descriptors. Colleen will tell you about that, but our 2012 document talks about the level descriptors and how it works in the South African NQF space. We have a policy on recognizing professional bodies and registering the professional designations. We in South Africa and SAQA understand that we work in a value chain and we have differing responsibilities, and professional bodies whose work comes post qualification achievement in awarding license to practice and currency of continuous professional development play a very important role in the NQF space. We have a policy on qualifications and part qualifications, credit accumulation and transfer, an assessment policy across the space. We have two national policies published by the Department of Higher Education and Training, an RPL policy, which also links to the SAQA published NQF policy. We have an articulation policy, and I think more recently, we've been involved in the evaluation of foreign qualifications for over 16 years. And we have a policy that we published in 2017 on how we evaluate foreign qualifications and place them on the South African NQF. And in 2018, we did an addendum, and we are partnering with UNESCO on the global qualifications passport to find a way of using RPL to recognize the qualifications of refugees and asylum seekers, because actually 80% of them live in Africa, not in Europe. And this has been an ongoing issue in Africa, which we as Africans need to address. So this is something we're very excited about. After Zambia was the front runner, we will be the second African country to implement the Addis Convention and look for a way of recognizing qualifications of people who can't present their documentation. Next slide. Okay, this is for Colleen. I'll hand over to Colleen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me. So I'm going to take the next few slides and then I will hand back to Dr. Reddy. So we thought we'll start off this conversation by looking at level descriptors and learning outcomes. Now, the level descriptor is a type of learning outcome at the area of the National Qualifications Framework. So level descriptors, they indicate the generic competencies that all qualifications need to develop at all NQF levels. So if you look at an NQF, you will see that there are two or more qualifications on the same NQF level. And we use the level descriptor to indicate the comparability of the cognitive levels of the exit level outcomes of the qualification and the generic cognitive competencies. So learning outcomes outside of the framework, you will find those in modules or subjects in NQF qualifications. So they will have learning outcomes and they are made visible by specific exit level outcomes, associated assessment criteria and curriculum content. So the South African NQF level descriptors, we've got 10 competencies across the 10 levels. So we have 100 statements. So these 10 competencies, we see it at every level. It indicates progression, so it will increase in the level of complexity as the learner moves from level 1 to level 10. So we've got scope of knowledge, knowledge literacy, method and procedure, problem solving, ethics and professional practice, accessing, processing and managing information, producing and communicating information, context and systems, management of learning and accountability. So those are the 10 competencies. And we will look for the applied competence across the 10 levels. And the 3 categories are practical competence, foundational competence, and reflexive competence. So there are many uses of level descriptors. So you can use the level descriptors, you can design new study programs, you can write learning outcomes, you can write assessment criteria, you can assess prior learning, you can evaluate qualifications, you can relate modules and qualifications to each other, you can use it for accreditation purposes, you can incorporate non-traditional learning into credit-bearing subject or modules, and you can assess or determine learning progression at different levels. So the level descriptors needs to be very specific to a specific level at the NQF, and it will assist to place more than one qualification at that same level, as long as it develops the same level of complexity. So the critical cross-field outcomes, this is a characteristic of the learning outcomes. Now, these critical cross-field outcomes are embedded in the level descriptors. And I don't want to read through every one, but I'll just highlight the key points. So we've got 7 critical cross-field outcomes, general ones. So it's identify and solve problems using critical and creative thinking, work as a member of a team, organize and manage oneself, evaluate information, communicate effectively. The 6th one is science and technology for the environment and health of others. The 7th one is demonstrate an understanding of the world as a set of related systems. Now, as I said, these are embedded in the South African level descriptors. We also have 5 developmental outcomes, which are also embedded in the descriptors. So the one is to reflect on and explore a variety of strategies to learn more effectively, participate as responsible citizens, be culturally and aesthetically sensitive, explore education and career opportunities, and develop entrepreneurial opportunities. So those are the key concepts in the level descriptors, and it is embedded in the level descriptors. So Dr. Reddy mentioned that the South African NQF is a relational tool. So there are other relational functions that the South African NQF has. So firstly, it is an NQF information system to manage the NQF. And we in South Africa, we call this the National Learners Records Database, the NLRD. It also, we use it to link qualifications to learning pathways. We're very specific. A qualification cannot be a dead end. There must be a clear pathway. The qualification must articulate to something else. We also use it to evaluate foreign qualifications. Then we verify national qualifications. We recognize professional bodies and we register their professional designations. We also do research and we provide advice. So this is a snapshot of the National Learners Records Database as at 30th of September 2020. So you can see that on this database, we've got over 20 million learners. We've got over 17 million qualification achievements. Then we've got over 111 million part qualification achievements. So remember, one learner may have more than one qualification. So that is why the learners and the qualification is not the same. I could have 5 qualifications. I could have 10 part qualifications. And then also, here you see here, learners with achievements through recognition of prior learning. We very we're very clear about that, and we want to make sure that people are able to access education. You know, Julie spoke about the fractured past before 1994. So now we're making sure that learners with the experience that they can actually, their prior learning can be recognized. So as at 30th of September, we had 99,102 learners that had achieved a qualification or a part qualification through RPL. Then we also keep a record of the assessors, accredited providers, and as we said, a key function is that we recognize professional bodies and we register their professional designations. And you can see here, as of September 2020, we had already registered 105 professional bodies, 384 designations, and then the professionals that actually have those designations, we have over 1 million on the NLRD. In terms of articulation, I think in one of the previous webinars, people were asking, so do people actually articulate between sub-frameworks? Now, we did a study, we looked at the learning pathways between 1995 and 2014, and we looked at, do people really move from one sub-framework to another? So you can see the blue part here, this is general and further education and training qualification sub-framework, and the green is our occupational qualification sub-framework. Then the yellow part is the higher education qualification sub-framework. So in this study, we saw that people are moving from the general and further into occupational qualifications. They're moving from general and further into higher education. But for this particular survey, we never saw any movement from occupational to higher or from higher to occupational. But it's good that we are able to draw these trends. Once you've got information in your National Learners Records database, you can actually see whether people are really moving if you track the qualifications that they are studying. So we also recognize foreign qualifications. There are 3 parts to the process. People apply, then we first verify that qualification. So when we verify, we look at, is the institution an authentic institution? Is it recognized in the country of origin? Then we look at the qualification to see, is that qualification recognized in the country of origin? And then is that institution, does the institution actually have the right to offer that qualification? Then we also look at the award, the documents. We look for any signs of tampering, and we check whether the learner actually received that qualification. So somebody might have, they might have received the qualification, but they might have made the 50, they might have turned it a 50% into an 80%. So we also look for those issues of tampering with documents. And as Julie mentioned, we are also part of the UNESCO Qualifications Passport. Zambia mentioned it in their presentation last week. So this is a way to look at how we will be recognizing the qualifications of refugees and asylum seekers. So after we have verified, you know, because it's difficult to verify qualifications of refugees and asylum seekers, because it will place them at risk if we write to the institution to ask if they had studied there, because we don't know what the reason was that they had left that country. So it's treated with a lot of respect and confidentiality, those kinds of qualifications that we receive. So after we have verified, then we compare the qualification to a qualification on the South African NQF. And we use the South African NQF and its policies as a benchmark when we do that comparison. So after the comparison is done, we issue a ACQF certificate of evaluation. Now, in last week, Miriam spoke to you about the e-certificate of evaluation. So this is our ACQF certificate of evaluation. So we issue the certificate, and this is the seal. You can see the black part here. That is the seal. And by now you know what a QR code is. So this QR code, once you just take a photograph with your cell phone, it will show you who the certificate belongs to. So we are very, very strict about who can apply for the certificate of evaluation. It can only be the qualification holder, because the qualification holder will take responsibility for ensuring that they only share this certificate of evaluation with people that they want to share with. So this is a very exciting new type of seal that we have, where we have the QR code, and the QR code can be shared, the seal can be opened, and also the certificate can be downloaded into a PDF. But the qualification holder has sole responsibility of ensuring that they only share with certain people. So in terms of, we verify South African qualifications. So we've got a verifications project, the verifications directorate at ACQF. And if you go onto the ACQF website and you look for the verifications, you will see that this will come up. So we've got clients in the private sector, and that will be, you know, we deal with them in a certain, we've got a certain way of dealing with them. Then we've got public sector clients, and then there are individual verification letters. We can also provide an extract from the National Learners Records database. Like, I can go on and I can ask which qualifications are on the NLRD, but this is not a verified. There's only the top section that is completely verified, and the client will ask for a verification from ACQF. And then search, once you are a client of ACQF, you can do a search to see how far the verifications are, and we get a lot of bulk clients. And there are certain laws and certain policies that have been passed in South Africa that people applying for certain jobs must have a ACQF verification in order to get access to any of employment opportunities. So this is a very good service that we offer, and lots of people make use of it. We also offer it for when clients leave South Africa and they require the verification of the South African qualification. We have a very, very strict counter-fraud focus. The definition of an authentic qualification, we are very clear about it, and in the NQF Amendment Act that is not promulgated yet, we are very clear what the definition is. So it's the provider or the program. The accreditation must be there to offer that qualification. The qualification in South Africa, it must be registered on the NQF, and the qualification holder must be the authentic qualification holder of that qualification. So ACQF takes responsibility for developing 2 separate registers. So we maintain a register of fraudulent qualifications, and we maintain a register of misrepresented qualifications. Now you will ask, what is the difference? The difference is that only a judge can indicate that this qualification is a fraudulent qualification. So only a court of law can determine that. But in ACQF, we can determine that this qualification is misrepresented. And I've given you the example of if a learner perhaps changes the symbols on the transcript, or the learner changes the name of the person. So we can determine that that is a misrepresented qualification, and it will go on to a specific register. We also recognize professional bodies, and we've got a very clear definition of what is a professional body. So it's statutory, established by an Act of Parliament, or a non-statutory body of expert practitioners in an occupational field. Then we also register their designations, and the designation is the title that is conferred by the professional body in order to recognize the person's expertise and or the right to practice in an occupational field. Nearing the end of this of my section of the presentation, we conduct a lot of research because it is also good to understand whether your NQF is making an impact. So we conduct impact studies to see how we can improve the NQF. So I've just listed some of the key learnings from the NQF impact study of 2014 and 2017. Then we also did some learning pathways research to see how we can improve in this area. In 2018, the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, they conducted an impact evaluation, and we were very pleased to see that they showed that the NQF is embedded and being implemented across the system, even though it was uneven. And in 2020, we are part of a case study of flexible learning pathways. It's an 8-country study, and UNESCO is driving it. So we also identify good examples of national policy framework structures, instruments, and institutional practices. We've been speaking a lot about alignment, and we have completed our alignment to the SADC qualifications framework. If you click on this link, it will take you to the South African National Qualifications Framework Alignment Report, which was approved by the Technical Committee on Certification and Accreditation in May 2019. I will now just mute my mic so that I can go back to Dr. Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Sorry, Eduardo, how much time do we have left? I mean, I'll go quickly to the last few.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I will just go through, I won't go through the details. We have learned some very valuable lessons over the 22 years of the NQF. What we do know is there is no script for this. It is very contextually specific, and it's very meets the individual needs in the country and its people at the space where it's at. Our first CEO, Mr. Samuel Isaacs, was a very wise guy, and he noted when he left SAQA in 2012 that we make the NQF road by walking boldly, accountably, and reflectively, because there is no script for it. One of our critics called it no quick fixes. We have a lot of people who call it a neoliberal construct, have been very critical of it. So we've had our adversaries, and we like to engage with them and hear them, because sometimes the comment is very constructive. I just want to mention quickly Dennis Gunning. He likened this constructing the NQF to a movie in the 1980s called Field of Dreams, where somebody built a baseball field in the middle of a farmland in Iowa. And it said, if you build it and you dream enough and you champion it, people will come. So I thought it is a very instructive quote to also include here. So the next slide, Colleen. So these are key, Colleen. Okay, key lessons learned. The growth in the number of sectoral, national, there's been a growth in the number of sectoral, national, regional, and continental qualifications frameworks. So certainly the numbers, there are over 140 odd NQFs in the world. Qualifications frameworks integrate, and for South Africa, it integrates our system for education, training, development, and work. It's linked to transformation and all the principles I spoke about. Lifelong learning is central to qualifications frameworks. It needs to be understood holistically and look holistically at the individual needs rather than any sectoral or other agendas. There is increased use of level descriptors and learning outcomes internationally. The impact of NQFs depends on a number of criteria. You can see that there are already useful theoretical frameworks for assessing the impact of NQFs, and SAQA has done at least 3 or 4 impact studies. The qualifications framework are catalysts for connecting qualifications, learning pathways, sectors and organizations, and a number of other things. In South Africa, qualifications frameworks are linked to access, redress, learning pathways, mobility, quality, and transparency, as we have shown. It is very important
I'm not sure if Dr. Reddy is has a connection problem. Colleen, do you know?
Julie, are you still there? I don't know, but let me just try to finish.
Okay.
So on the second last bullet, and if Julie comes in, then I'll just stop speaking again.
Okay.
It is important to allow extended time for full stakeholder participation and inclusivity. And then we also added in the global framework for 2030 that qualifications frameworks needs to ensure learning pathways, etc., etc. And on the last slide, Julie, are you there? If Julie isn't there, then I'll just conclude. So the overarching lessons, lesson one, we're saying that qualifications frameworks are here to stay. They link education and training systems to lifelong learning. Within NQF's level descriptors and learning outcomes are used to enhance, redress, access, etc. Lesson two, it is important to assess the impact of qualifications frameworks, and we have several studies show how you can do it. The lesson three is that qualifications frameworks need to address system alignment, and so stakeholder involvement and inclusivity are important for the implementation of qualifications frameworks. And then we also said relational agency is needed to implement qualifications frameworks as relational mechanisms. I think that's the end of the presentation. I don't know if Julie's back, but I think thank you very much on behalf of Julie and on me. And ACQF, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Colleagues, let's give a round of applause to Colleen and Julie for this brilliant presentation, showing all the work in this journey of over 2 decades of national qualifications framework in South Africa. So we will have, we are a little bit behind our schedule. We have a number of questions, but many of the questions on the chat box have already been dealt with. And we have 2 questions, and let us leave them for the small space on Q&A after the presentation of Sierra Leone. Thank you very much again, Sakwa, for all this effort and for the reflection that you bring into this into this webinar today with your 2 decades of experience, of debate, of engaging with adversaries, of dealing with access and redress. Thank you so much. And Mr. Jallo, now you have the floor for your presentation of approximately 20 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Jallo.
Thank you very much. Today in Sierra Leone is a public holiday. Muslims are celebrating the birthday of Muhammad. So I wish for a start to congratulate all Muslims. Wish them a good holiday.
Thank you.
Sierra Leone is a small country in West Africa with very beautiful beaches and a country that has a long history of education. But when you go through our presentation, you will realize that sometimes or most times, it is not your starting early. Other people can catch up. So you can see that we hosted the first set of schools and universities in sub-Saharan Africa. But when you look at most other African countries, especially in East and Southern Africa, we are decades behind them in terms of the NQF. So for me, for us, we are privileged to present the very day South Africa is presenting. And so we will be humbled by the very limited achievements we have. But we have a goal like looking at a country like South Africa. So we will be measuring our progress as we go along. Next slide, please. In our presentation, we have attempted to introduce a historical element so that in your quiet moments, you can read about what Sierra Leone has gone through, the ups and downs. I just want to mention two. We had a rebel war that was 10 years, 1991 to 2001. And we are one of few countries in Sierra Leone in Africa that was hit by the Ebola. So you will see that under COVID, there are a lot of lessons that we learned. Go to the next slide, please. That is a brief country profile. It's a small country. Our official language is English. Next slide, please. Next slide. You see it's a small population of 7.8 million. And like I said earlier in my intro, we have a long history of education. Next slide, please. I have mentioned this statement before. You want to move straight. Yeah, next slide. Now we move on to the attempts at education reforms. We had the first major attempt in 1974-75, but lack of political will and resources, only a fraction of those reforms were implemented. In the early 90s, following our participation at the Jomtien Conference, we introduced the 6-3-3-4, 6 years of primary, 3 years of secondary basic, 3 years of senior secondary, and 4 years of tertiary. Next slide. There was a third attempt at consolidating the 6-3-3-4 by the creation of 3 important bodies, the Tertiary Education Commission, and the rearrangement of teacher colleges and technical institutions into polytechnics. I think we are the only country in West Africa that did that, where teacher training and TVET education are provided for the same institution as the polytechnics. And C, the NCTVA replaced the Institute of Education so that the NCTVA will certify graduates of both technical and teacher training. The essence here was to have parity of esteem. So we felt that one way of boosting the image of technical and vocational education was to have a single examination body that catered for both teacher education and TVET. We had a 4th attempt on the Bamanja Commission, and although there are many recommendations, but what was actually done was to add a year to senior secondary school, but that lasted only for 2 years. We have gone back to the 6-3-3-4. The 5th attempt at reforms came in 2018 when we had a new government with a flagship program of human capital development. And the 3 major things that were done was to declare basic and senior education free, was to allocate 20% of the GDP to education sector, and the Ministry of Education was then split into 2 ministries, Ministry for Basic and Senior Secondary Education and the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education. With regard to NQF development, we have participated in a number of fora arising from the ECOWAS initiative, starting with the Abuja meeting on regional qualifications, certification, as well as the development of competency-based education and training curricula done by Nigeria, but now adopted by ECOWAS countries. UNESCO partnered with ECOWAS to launch a new initiative for the recognition of skills and qualifications within and across ECOWAS. In 2018, to be specific, we had two main workshops. One was the adoption of a ministerial declaration, and another was attempting to have a regional certification framework. The second workshop laid the foundation for community practice, common language for dialogue and cooperation, as well as recognition of competencies and qualifications. We also have the element of quality assurance. Now, in 2019, ECOWAS, we still moved on the development and the definition of tools and common vocabulary, on the elaboration of self-assessment reports, action plans, strategy and implementation for NQF. And we also looked at the implication of the AU work and the related agenda to the certification and mobility of competencies. Surveys were done in the sub-region to capture the variability that exists, and an attempt was made to understand the stages of NQF development process in all countries, and specific items that were looked at were as to whether the NQF in each country is all embracing, whether it was comprehensive. Well, initially when we started ours last year, the discussions, we were focusing on technical and vocational education, but now we are moving towards having a more comprehensive one. We also looked at how many levels each NQF had, and how the regulatory bodies for the various governance systems operate, what quality assurance mechanisms are to be embedded, and whether the qualifications were registered. The ECOWAS looked at also the allocation of credits in NQF levels and processes, and there was willingness to support each country in their respective national development plans with respect to NQF. Now, Sierra Leone, where we are, following the 2018 declaration of the flagship program as being the one on human capital development, and allocating 20% of the budget. Like I said earlier, we had two new ministries, one for basic and senior education and another for technical and higher education. And in all of these, the development of an NQF was mentioned, more articulated in the Ministry for Technical and Higher Education. And for that, we requested technical assistance from the VET toolbox, where it's not for COVID, the consultants will have been in country right now. We also have plans to restructure the NCTVA as well as other higher institution bodies to respond to the new realities. A committee was set up, which we are hosting. Whilst we are working on our committee, we also realized that the Tertiary Education Commission was also independently thinking about an NQF for higher education. The DFID project on strategic partnership for higher education, innovation and reform was also interested in the NQF as part of their desire to infuse a lot more quality assurance into the systems, as well as the necessary flexibilities. Next. So what we have done in the last 3 months was that these 3 initiatives from TEC, from the Sphere project and ourselves, we have now agreed to merge these 3 initiatives so that we can pull our resources together and have a system that will be more comprehensive. We have done that, and we have agreed to now have a committee that will look at the comprehensive development of the integrated development for the comprehensive NQF. And for that, we have identified from the World Bank, the Skills Development Fund, some resources that can be put at our disposal. Of course, the VET toolbox is on. The Sphere project is also on. And there is a lot of commitment on the part of government to support the process. This does not only include funding. We have engaged the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's office so that the necessary legislation, they can support us with the necessary legislation. So the new committee is being formed, and we're in the process of developing now a roadmap that can have milestones, which we'll be very pleased to be presenting on the webinars from time to time. The last part of the slides there is talking about, now you can understand where we were requesting whether there could be shortcuts of NQF, because we are in a hurry to catch up with the rest of Africa, and we will be very happy to have technical support in that direction. Next slide, please. With respect to COVID-19, all the institutions were closed down. We had an inter-district lockdown, except for the movement of essential goods. At some point, curfew was introduced. For schools and colleges, we made use of the radio, television, and online teaching was done. Naturally, there were challenges, but as we progressed, we were able to build up on the successes and attempt to address these challenges. New pedagogy approaches were experimented using Zoom and other platforms. In spite of all of these things we did, the academic year was not lost as far as the education sector was concerned. For primary and secondary schools, we were able to conduct the usual 3 public examinations. And for the colleges, we are now trying to round up the 2019-2020 academic year, and we are hopeful that the new academic year will start in January. Very recently, the airport was opened, and about 2 days ago, the curfew was lifted temporarily at the midst of, within the midst of the COVID-19 health protocols. Yeah? So we want to thank you for listening to us, and they will be bothering you and our colleagues in other parts of the world for advice and support as we move into this very exciting journey. Thank you very much.
Let us also give a round of applause to Mr. Jallo and Sierra Leone for all the effort they are taking in their hands with partners, with different partners, with the different institutions, and moving step by step and asking questions as well to the peers, such as always this question that Mr. Jallo is raising since the second webinar, I think. Is there a way to move a bit more efficiently, let's say at a quicker pace in developing and then starting implementation of the NQF? Thank you very much, Mr. Jallo. I would like to then say that we would have now a small 5 minutes opportunity to reply to the questions we had in the chat box. Okay, I see there is another question from Jean Adotevi, and this time it is a question to Sierra Leone, to Mr. Jallo. So, and then we go immediately after this small session to this session dedicated to Europass digital credentials. Again, thank you, team from Sierra Leone for this presentation and for the overview, the context, where it all started. It's also very fundamental, and we don't always know exactly the roots of the problem. So I have here marked 2 questions to SAQA that were not yet discussed and dealt with through the possibilities of the chat box. So one of them is the following, and the question comes from Mrs. Abida. What relationship do all these policies, I mean SAQA, NQF, South African NQF, have with the SADC regional qualifications framework, with SADC qualifications framework and its implementation? So this is one question. I think it was not yet dealt with in the chat box directly. And there is another question, and this question comes from Mozambique, from Ida Alvarinho, who is asking, what are the means used by SAQA to verify that, for example, foreign certificates, diplomas that are requesting for recognition in South Africa have been awarded by legitimate institutions and really represent properly approved qualifications in the country of origin? So what are the means normally SAQA use to undertake this very important part of the recognition process? I don't know if Julie and Dr. Reddy and Colleen would like them to give elements of response to these 2 questions.
Thank you, Eduarda, and my apologies again to everybody for suddenly disappearing. Unexpected load shedding in my area. I will let Colleen or even Joe respond to the one about the SADC question, because they were very instrumental. I know Joe played a very key role, and so did Colleen. I will speak about recognition of foreign qualifications, and I hope I understand the question. But when we get an application to recognize a foreign qualification, the first part of the recognition cycle is to verify with the foreign qualification, foreign institution in question. So if I'll give you an example, if it's in the UK or say if it's in Ghana, we call we verify first that it is a registered and recognized institution in the country in which it operates. Secondly, we verify that that institution in question that issued that certificate that is being presented is accredited to offer the actual program that the person claims that they achieved. Thirdly, that it was issued in the name of the person claiming that qualification. If the qualification evaluation process passes that phase, we then move on to phase 2, which is then comparing it to a similar qualification on the South African NQF. after doing quite a comprehensive comparison of the qualification with another qualification on the South African NQF, we then located onto the South African NQF, and we issue that certificate of evaluation to recognize it as being on the equivalent level of a South African NQF qualification, and we do that accordingly. So that's how it works. I hope that's what you were asking.
I wonder, is that correct, Ida? Is it? I think it's a quite clear response from Dr. Reddy. And then I see that Joe Samuels wrote already in the chat quite an important aspect. So he underlines that one of the strategic things that South Africa and Seychelles, both countries that have already referenced, aligned fully to the SADC qualifications framework, one of the things they should be doing is to ensure that the SADC QF qualifications framework level is displayed on the national certificates and other qualifications documents. So this is exactly one of the important commitments of members of SADC qualifications framework, similar to the EQF, and this would assure this linkage between the qualifications framework, the alignment, successful alignment process, and recognition. I don't know if Pauline would like to add, to change anything. And I see that Fiona added, we are moving in this direction. Thanks a lot, Fiona, for this point.
Thank you, Eduarda.
Yes, please, Pauline.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I understood the question correctly. The question was, how do South Africa's policies relate to the SADC qualifications framework? Am I correct? I think
yes.
I think that's the question. I mean, Joe can come in as well. But when I did this, the SADC qualifications framework presentation, I said that we have 10 alignment criteria. Now, each of those 10 alignment criteria have sub-criteria. It will ask things like, how do qualifications get placed onto the NQF, and so on and so on. And that is where our policies come in. Because in order to meet that alignment criteria and the sub-criteria, you have to show how these things are operationalized in the country. So that is how the policies become relevant. And if you can download our alignment report, and you will see there that we refer to all the policies, and we refer to the Acts, NQF Act, SAQA Act, and so on. And then I'm just responding to Joe Samuel's question on the chat. You know, this is not an easy thing to do. Now, when we developed the alignment criteria, the last criteria was that all qualification certificates must display the SADC qualifications framework level. When we were piloting that alignment criteria, we changed that to say that there must be clear plans in place, because we've got 3 sub-frameworks, and each of them have different roles in terms of certification. So perhaps one quality council would like to see the SADC qualifications framework level on the actual certificate. Another quality council might want to see it on the transcript. So we haven't fully worked out exactly in the sub-frameworks how that is going to be done. That is why we changed that alignment criterion to make sure that there are plans in place. So that is the one thing. And then I saw another question that I need to explain the difference between a qualification and a designation. A qualification is a qualification that you receive either full-time but you receive a qualification award. A designation is something that you receive from a professional body. It gives you a certain license to practice, or it gives you the right to practice. The qualification becomes an underlying factor in the achievement of that designation. So when you belong to a professional body, you have to adhere to codes of practice and standards for that professional body. If for some reason you no longer comply with that code of conduct, the professional body can expel you from the professional body and take away your designation, which is your right to practice in that field. But if your qualification was obtained legally, they cannot take that qualification away from you. So there is a distinct difference between the qualification and the designation. And then also just to add into the verification, and with the SAQA certificate of evaluation, we've got the real-time verification now where you can see immediately who has logged onto your profile, and it will tell the date and the time that the qualification was verified. But Julie is correct in saying that we contact those institutions and we find out about those qualifications to make sure that the institutions have in fact issued them. But there are also a number of other websites where you can find out information about institutions in countries and whether they have the right to operate. I hope I've answered everybody's questions.
I think so, Colleen. Thank you very much, Colleen, Dr. Reddy, for the replies. If participants would still have any comments or questions, please use the chat box. Thank you so much again, SAQA. And there is a question by Jean Adotevi to Sierra Leone. And the question is, what is Sierra Leone's understanding of embedding quality assurance in their national qualifications framework, which was one of the points underlined by Mr. Jallo. Mr. Jallo, would you have some clarification to this question? How do you see quality assurance as part of your national qualifications framework?
Well, as we all know,
yeah, continue.
Yes, as we all know, when you are given an award, the award specifies the kinds of competencies you are able to exhibit in the world of work. And out of some research or talking with employers, especially those in the private sector, concerns were raised about holders of certain qualifications that don't perform as they would have expected. So the interaction with some of these private sector bodies brought out the issue of the quality of the graduates. I think it is largely because of this that the quality assurance element has been embedded into the SPHERE project. It is just to ensure that one, for the same qualification awarded across different institutions, one should expect that they enjoy the same parity of esteem. You know.
Thank you very much. It is a fundamental element to create trust, qualification system and framework. Thank you very much. I'd like then to thank the two first cases, South Africa and Sierra Leone, for all this sharing of very important insights that have actually added value to all the knowledge that was discussed and gathered so far through the previous webinars. Many new elements were emphasized today, and immediately pass the floor to the next session on Europass digital credentials. So thank you, Dennis and Ildiko, for this presentation. I think it's a very interesting topic for everybody. Thank you, including for me. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Eduarda. And thank you for the audience. Just a few final preparatory things with the screen before we can start. I think it works.
It's not yet in full slides.
It's fine. I can start anyway. Yeah. So first of all, so from our side, a huge thank you to ACQF and ETF and all the countries participating in this series of webinars. I followed most of them, and I think also for us in the context of the European qualifications framework, it was very interesting to follow it and very inspirational as well. So thank you very much for that, and we also hope that this part on digital credentials will also be interesting for you. We already saw some references to this important strand of work in the presentation we saw today already, and in a few previous ones. So I think it's a very important topic to address here. So today I will say just a few words on the background of this, and I'll go quick because due to the time. I think it's much more interesting to see, showcase a demo of how this looks like in the context of the new Europass portal, and my colleague Ildiko Mazar will take care of that. So, and after that we can discuss questions from your side, of course, and even after that, if you have questions or want to. You want to be in touch with us on further developments from your side, of course, we're happy to have a talk on that. We know that peer learning and sharing experiences is so important in the context of qualification frameworks. So we definitely want to provide our support if needed. Yes, there we go, right on time.
Dennis, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
You hear me now, I think.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the new Europass. Europass is a set of online tools to help users communicate their skills, qualifications, and experiences and manage their career online. It already existed quite some time, and we updated the portal as of the 1st of July this year as one of the 12 flagship actions of the so-called European Skills Agenda, which was adopted on the 1st of July this year. The primary ambition of the skills agenda, and also I think of Europass, is to make lifelong learning a reality for everyone in Europe. And given the current crisis context, I think it's even more important. So if you look into the elements of the new Europass, and I'll try to go quick, consists of an interoperability mechanism to exchange information on skills and qualifications amongst different actors. For instance, if you have information on your resume, you want to share it with employers, you can do it with Europass, or share it on portals like LinkedIn. That's also possible. Yes. E-portfolio, the new Europass offers a range of online e-portfolio tools and information for people of all ages and all stages of their lives to manage their learning and career. For instance, with the help of a personal profile to record all your skills, qualifications, and experiences. And also in this case, Ildiko will give an example of what the e-portfolio looks like. Then next, on information provision, Europass is offering more and more information which is relevant for all users. And if I can give an example, in the context of the qualification frameworks, we are offering qualifications databases from the different countries that are part of the European qualifications framework. And the idea is that they, on a voluntary basis, offer their databases with all their qualifications they are offering, which have gone through the national qualification frameworks. With that, people can make can compare qualifications across different countries, for instance. Right now, we are offering qualifications databases of around, I don't know by heart, but around 8 to 9 countries. And of course, the aim is to offer the qualification database of all EU member states. Yeah, and then the European Digital Credentials infrastructure. That's part of the presentation, so I won't elaborate on that. And over here on the screen, you also see 2 links. The first deals with the digital credentials infrastructure itself, and the second one is the starting page for the qualifications that are offered online. And it might be nice to have a look yourself what we're doing there and how you can also compare related qualifications, for instance. Yeah, so Europass digital credentials infrastructure, as I've said, it's central to the EU skills agenda. And I think I'll try to go quick. It's also mentioned in the Digital Education Action Plan. Of course, the Europass decision, which was, which formed the basis for the work around Europass, but also the European Data Strategy and the European Skills Agenda, what I just said. So I think this emphasizes the importance of this trend of work, and that it's covered by many strands of work within the European Commission right now. So yeah, that's the reason why we're doing it. So in terms of opportunities, of course, interoperability, I think I don't need to elaborate on that. Very important. The use of a data model, issue credentials online, and to develop your own applications with it. Furthermore, what is good to mention is that with Europass, there's already access to 2 million wallets of users. So in these wallets, you can add these credentials, and Ilko will show that in a moment, with also access to qualification and awarding bodies data. So it's more of an overarching framework, basically. And then the interesting part, I think, of this, the live demo of this, and I'll give the word to Ilko to say a few words on that and to show it from our screen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. That's a very useful talk, and I'm very happy to follow this with some practical introduction of the system itself. Thank you very much for setting the ground by mentioning interoperability and the strong reference to our data model. I think as a disclaimer in advance, it's important to mention that our data model has been deliberately built to encompass any potential standard you may already be familiar with, and you are certainly very familiar with the European qualification framework and some of the national qualification frameworks across Europe. Most of you are probably familiar with ESCO, the European Classification of Skills Opportunities, or Skills Qualifications and Occupations. And we are also providing a route for any framework templates that are not thought out by ourselves. So you are able to refer to other external frameworks for competences or qualification frameworks, etc. So that what you end up with is tweaking a little bit of the templates and the XML files that you produce as issuers. And voila, you have a Europass compliant credential that people are able to, as citizens, are able to utilize for admission to other education provider institutions, or to share with prospective employers as part of their CVs and the job applications. Another quick comment before I share my screen is that the way we interpret digital credentials, and it's very important to get the definitions right straight at the beginning, is that it's a documented statement about an individual, and it's a claim about what the owner has achieved in terms of learning outcomes that could be linked to different skills, competences, and knowledge. It's also important to know that ours, we use the W3C standards to produce verifiable credentials, and they can only be issued by institutions, organizations who possess a qualified electronic seal. And this is one safeguard against diploma mills and fraud. It also proves to be a bottleneck because institutions have to acquire these qualified e-seals, but that's unfortunately just a must without which people cannot progress. We're still in early stages, but we foresee within the next 5-10 years that most education providers, including higher education institutions, would acquire these e-seals and will be able to move from the traditional realm of credential issuing into the digital world. And now I'm going to share my screen and show you my Europass profile. So once any individual from any part of the world records or registers a Europass account, this is a free account where people can keep an e-portfolio. As Dennis already mentioned, this is integrated and interoperable with a growing number of job providers and course providers. We have a direct link to the European qualification database that uses the exact same data model that we do. So the people who have these Europass accounts are able to find courses that match their skills, competences, and career goals. You can set this up and tweak this. So you can log your skills, but you can also get your skills registered from your digital credentials. And this is where we get to the digital credentials. Part of the Europass account is a so-called library where people can create and upload their various CVs. They can design and draft cover letters. And one part that is particularly important from our point of view is the certificates and diplomas, which is the Europass implementation of the EDCI wallet. This is just the first of the implementations. We encourage all the early adopters to design their own wallets if they like, to incorporate the code into their existing student information systems. And in that case, their students can be directly awarded Europass compliant credentials. But if an institution doesn't have their own implementation of the wallet, the learners can still receive their diplomas, qualifications, or other types of credentials that are any shape, size, or form in their Europass and store it there, share it from there. And this is what it looks like. So just to show what one looks like, you can be issued a digital credential either via email, and then you will receive an attachment, which is an XML file. That's the format of a digital credential, a Europass digital credential. Or if the issuer organization knows your wallet address, which in this case, in my case, is this 8-character string, then you directly get the credential deposited as if you were initiating money transfer to somebody's bank account, if you know the bank details. So just to show you a qualification type credential, I can click on these thumbnail images to get a preview of the credentials. And that's where you will see a facade or a first preview where you just see some basic front information. This almost looks like a PDF scan of a normal, the traditional credential with the name and seal or logo of the issuing organization, the title of the credential, the name of the credential holder, and what they have achieved, and of course an issuance date. This is customizable, or very soon will be. Our developer team is working on it. And if you'd like to see some underlying information of this credential, you are able to click on that credential detail button, as I did. And on the left-hand side, you will see that there are different sections depending on the data richness of this credential, where you can see further information about the issuing organization, the credential owner, its in your case, if you open this credential from your own wallet, you will see information about you. But if you share this credential with a third party, for example, a prospective employer, they will be able to see the credential owners as they were set by the issuing organization. So there again, remembering from the previous presentations how important it is to be able to verify the owner of the credential. This is an important aspect here, that the viewers can actually check the data content of the credential. And very slowly, but eventually it did appear, we are also offering 5 authentication and verification checks. It will soon be 6. One will be the technical format of the XML file, which is the credential, the seal. If you do not have a qualified e-seal, you will fail this validation. We are working on a revocation list. So if for plagiarism or any other reasons, the issuer revokes your credential, later on the viewer of the credential will see this. And this is something that you will find particularly interesting. We are going to connect to the accreditation database, which is the qualification database or part of it. So we will be able to see that if a qualification or a digital credential is a qualification type credential, the issuer will have to prove that they are legally allowed and authorized to issue such credentials. Now, this is something that we rely on the member states' judgment. There is no forcing of a uniform European approach. So whatever country finds accredited as a program or an institution, this is where we will see if the accreditation check is completed. And there's validity. Certain credentials are only valid for a period of time. You have to renew your credentials after a year or 5 or whatever. So if there's an expiry date set in the credential, once that's expired, this validity check will turn into the red X. So as I said before, we collect information about the issuer, the owner, the holder of the credential, great details about the achievements of the credential, including assessments, the modes and the grades, etc. Volumes of learning, ESCAD codes for the thematic area, ECT as credit points, qualification framework levels, whether it's an EQF or NQF, it's always referenced. And we are providing the basis for micro-credentialing. So we're still working on it, but sooner or later, people will be able to stack credentials and have full qualifications that have partial qualifications, let's say on course level. They'll be able to see activities involved in the achievement of this credential, and where it's relevant entitlements. That could be if you earn a master's degree, you are entitled to enroll in postgraduate studies, or if you have a law degree, you have the entitlement to act as an attorney, etc., etc. So this was a very quick run through. If you want to share this credential, you just click on the share button. Select a date by which, until which you would like to share this credential, generate a link, copy this link and send it to whoever you want to send it to, and that person or office will only have access to the credential you shared until the date you set in this share window. So that again is something to avoid abusing access to these credentials. So we are paying a lot of attention to GDPR issues and privacy issues. So that's the part from the wallet and the library. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see if there are any questions that I can answer, or if somebody could read it out to me.
Yes, thank you very much, Ildiko, for all the clear presentation. What from Julie Reddy, so from SAQA, what exactly is considered a credential to be included in a Europass account, probably? And then, also Julie Reddy is asking, would appreciate the definition of a credential and what it includes and excludes. Does it include CPD, etc.? So continuing professional development or lifelong learning?
Absolutely, absolutely. We, as I said at the very beginning, and I'm going to paste the link to our data model here from GitHub, we designed the data model so that it can allow any kind of issuing of any size of formal or non-formal credentials. So I could issue a credential to all of you who attended this webinar with details about the webinar, and whether you want to use it or share it, it's up to you. And obviously as a credential issuer, it's up to you what you issue a credit for. This is already a known culture from the open badge community. The thing that we are doing differently here is that the bar is a bit higher. So with the qualified e-seal, you can just randomly issue whatever credential, or it's at your own risk.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions to Ildiko or to Dennis on the Europass digital credentials? If not, let us also give a round of applause, Ildiko and Dennis, for this innovative moment. I know that, for example, SADC qualifications framework, the community is also already piloting the use of e-certificates. You heard the experience of Zambia and South Africa, and more, so wider plans also are already in place to continue and to expanding this pilot. So thanks a lot for your contribution to this peer learning activity today. Both of you from Europass. It's a pleasure.
No problem. And I do recognize that we ran over time. I had the bonus track for how to issue the credentials. I would just like to encourage you that if you are interested in the issuer side of this, please get in touch with us. I'm also going to paste our email address into the chat box, and we can send you all our leaflets or other more technical information, and we can set up bilateral meetings and let you know about it. But that's probably the wide picture is probably enough now.
Yes, yes, for the time being, yes. Thank you for raising the appetite of everybody. Thank you so much again. Let us then move already to our panel. So we are really getting close to the conclusion of this 7th webinar. So now we have a panel session, and we have I'm going to share my screen. So we have invited our participants who have been extremely attentive and actively participating. They have not yet been involved as speakers, and we asked them to help us summarize. Who else could summarize better the most important points than these participants? So you can see on your screen the participants invited. So we have eight speakers. They are going to, in 5 minutes each, summarize the most important lessons learned, let's say, what they bring to their countries and institutions from the knowledge and the experiences shared. And also they will give us their views on how the cooperation between national, regional qualifications frameworks in Africa and the ACQF, the continental level, can work and contribute to this enhanced integration and mobility that everybody aspires to have on the continent. So we prepared a very sort of a consolidated version of the contributions. So thank you very much all panelists for the replies you sent to the 2 questions. You all have seen, participants, the 2 questions. They were formulated in the invitation and also on the agenda. So we will go with this sequence, starting with Mozambique. Madame Ida Alvarinho, she is from the National Authority for Vocational Education, Director of Qualifications Department. And we will have the pleasure to interact with the Professor Kiama from République Démocratique du Congo, He is the executive secretary of ANAC-ESU, which is the National Quality Assurance for Higher Education. Then we move to another region to speak then with Mr. Bakour. He is the director of the National Agency for Evaluation and Accreditation in Higher Education in Morocco. He has been always a very frequent participant and actively very interested in all the discussions. Then we move again to another region, now in this case back to SADC, to a beautiful place, Seychelles, and Fiona Ernesta, the CEO of Seychelles Qualifications Authority, will also share her views. And it is then time to go to Central Africa, Cameroon. Dieudonné, who is one of the very young professionals. He is from the Ministry of Secondary Education. He's dealing exactly with technical vocational education in the domain of industry. He also has his views to share with us. And then we move to West Africa, le Sénégal. Monsieur Abdoul Lahaté Cissé de l'ANAQ-Sup, which is also the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education. He has been also a very frequent participant, always very interested. He also very eagerly contributed to the review of the mapping study on Senegal, produced in the framework of the ACQF project. We will also speak then with the North again, and this time with vocational education and training, actually, the ministry, the representative, Mr. Mustafa Hassan. Mr. Hassan also has been in almost all of the webinars, and he will also share his views. And finally, if Mr. Dr. James Joey, the principal education officer of the East African community, is here, he had some difficulties, connection. He will be then the last panelist, then sharing views with us today. Colleagues, if you could then mute your microphones. So the questions in French are these. So lessons learned through this series of webinars in view of the role, the added value of national qualifications frameworks. So main impressions, most important learnings and new lights, let's say, from these 7 webinars. What do you propose for further dissemination and use of all this knowledge? And then the second question is then your views about how can then the different levels, the national, regional, and continental, interact, cooperate for this enhanced integration and mobility. And here the questions in English as well. So we will have in Portuguese also. So we will have the 3 languages on this session. And we start then with Ida. Ida has sent us her contributions, her replies, and we have tried to summarize them in 2 slides, as we did for all the other participants. Ida, you have the floor. Ida will speak in Portuguese. Colleagues, please use your interpretation channel, the preferred language. Thank you very much, Ida.
Obrigada, Eduarda. Boa tarde a todos. Bonsoir.
Thank you,
Good
Eduarda.
afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, bonsoir, tout le monde.
Sobre as minhas impressões gerais, tal como está aqui no slide, eu acho que a primeira coisa que eu quero dizer é que estes webinars foram mesmo muito interessantes e muito úteis. De facto, trouxeram-nos uma larga e importante informação em muito pouco tempo. Portanto, foi uma forma de benchmarking muito proveitosa e também barata, para dizer a verdade, com muito esforço que a Eduarda e a sua equipe fizeram, mas foi mesmo muito bom. Ficamos a conhecer, primeiro, as entidades que respondem pelos quadros de qualificações nacionais, ficamos a conhecer os próprios quadros e ficamos também a conhecer especialistas nesta área que penso que depois podemos convidar e utilizar mais tarde.
We know who to connect with and interact with later on about all this process.
Aspecto importante e que está no slide é que também criou uma maior aproximação entre os países africanos. Às vezes, para nós em África, é mais fácil aceder à informação de outros continentes do que de países aqui de África. E esta foi uma boa forma.
Countries close to us in Africa, but from this platform we did that.
O que é que nós aprendemos? Uma das lições é que todo este movimento à volta dos quadros nacionais de qualificações é um fenómeno global e responde diretamente a todos estes desafios da globalização, facilita a mobilidade e a valorização dos cidadãos. O diálogo entre os países, etc., não se faz só a nível político ou económico. Os quadros de qualificações são um bom instrumento de respeito, diálogo, inclusão, integração, etc. Eu penso que até podemos dizer que pode ser um instrumento que contribui para a paz, não é? Porque os cidadãos que migram e se bem conseguirem ver as suas qualificações reconhecidas, possivelmente estarão mais felizes nos países e criarão menos turbulências.
In the countries that are hosting them, and they can share their experiences as well.
Também aprendemos que estes processos de desenho de quadros são processos às vezes longos, de aprendizagem contínua, de andar para a frente e melhorar, avaliar, melhorar. É um processo de paciência, de persistência, mas é possível. Quando começamos em que era uma tarefa que não íamos conseguir levar a cabo e agora está praticamente pronto, aprendemos que está na boa direção.
And we are in the right path.
Acho que como uma forma de continuar a divulgação, para além de uma ação que nós podemos, eu particularmente em Moçambique, gostaria muito de poder reproduzir estes seminários, mas para outros níveis de governação, até aos mais altos níveis de governação aqui do país. Portanto, é uma das coisas que estamos a tentar organizar. Vamos pedir a ajuda à Eduarda também, para convidar especialistas que falaram aqui neste webinar.
Help us gather all the experts that we were able to meet up with here in these sessions, so that they can interact with us in our processes. The sound is breaking. Sound from Ida Alvarinho keeps breaking.
Sobre agora o espaço.
Não.
Em termos estratégicos, eu acho que temos que manter este diálogo. Nós estamos, cada um dos países está a tratar do seu quadro nacional. Por outro lado, estamos inseridos também a tentar alinharmos-nos com os quadros regionais. Por exemplo, nós em Moçambique estamos a tentar referenciar-nos, alinhar-nos ao quadro da SADC. E por outro lado, estamos neste processo que para nós foi começado através da Eduarda, de irmos em direção ao desenho do quadro continental africano. Então, claro que tem que haver um diálogo.
Therefore, I think we must maintain the dialogue at all these levels.
Em termos estratégicos, devíamos organizar órgão que envolvesse estes três, as pessoas destas três que estão a olhar para os quadros regionais, para o quadro continental. E para isso, este órgão tem que ser criado, ele tem que existir, não pode ser uma coisa que só existe teoricamente. E eu acho que para isso a questão do financiamento é muito importante. Eu sinto que às vezes as questões relacionadas com o quadro regional da SADC nem sempre andam, porque não há um orçamento específico. Cada país manda os seus
The budget is
tem
not
dinheiro,
specific.
o
The
secretariado
countries are only
trabalha
contributing when they have means
condições muito
available or money
precárias
available.
e isso assim
And
não
currently we
funciona,
are
não vai
faced
para a
with so
frente.
many challenges. The
Esta
thing is not
questão do
moving and the
financiamento é muito
challenges are
importante.
many.
Devia-se criar um órgão estratégico,
Therefore, I think we should come up and
uma
establish
folha de
this
trabalhos que se pudesse
overarching
controlar,
body
que tivesse que cumprir, mas que tivesse
that
também
will be able to
efeito. Senão vai depender muito da boa
govern
vontade
this
daqueles
process.
que estão à
Because
frente
currently
e vamos
all
acabar
depends on
sendo
goodwill,
absorvidos pelas
availability
nossas
of
tarefas a nível
means,
nacional.
and then
E eu só tinha
sometimes
5 minutos, não sei
budgets
se
are
excedi, peço
reallocated
desculpa se
to
excedi, muito
redirected
obrigada.
to other aspects. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
For your reflections and for this brilliant idea that NQFs are for respect and can contribute to peace. I find this an excellent idea. Professeur Constant Kama, êtes-vous prêt? Professeur, vous avez été un des meilleurs participants de cette.
Professor, you've been one of the best participants into this webinar, and you have also prepared your contributions. I would like to give you the floor. Thank you very much, Eduardo, for the floor you've given me. I would like to sincerely thank you. And I'm saying that I have participated in these various webinars as Executive Secretary of the National Agency for Quality Assurance of my country. And you're going to understand that in the DR Congo, that's what I understand, that the National Qualification Framework involves various ministries. And it seems useful for me for the DR Congo is the Ministry of Labor, which coordinates that. But I will have to sincerely better be informed of its functioning or functions and to share the contributions of the representatives of the 22 qualifications frameworks. What I would like to say that the DR Congo is member of SADC. DR Congo is also member of CAMES and of the CPGN. In its national qualifications framework, it offers some certain advantages because they will have to adapt to these 3 regional organizations, and on the other hand, these frameworks will have to comply with the obligations of each structure. Of course, it is not an easy task. So, what I will have to also say is that despite some divergences of cultural and linguistic nature with the various regions in Africa, the qualifications levels in Africa is such that we find generally in each country the same levels. These issues about alignments and then adherences. And so I will have to also add, Eduardo, that sincerely there have been a mutual enriching for the various presentations. But it seems to me that this is a harmonization which is indispensable for the certifications framework at the national, regional, as well as the ACQF to enable a better mobilization and integration for each country despite the linguistic barriers that do not constitute a real handicap. And so, here I would like to simply say that we need to share information at the regional level of certifications for us to speak the same language. Political and financial commitment of the leaders at the national and regional levels. Why not continental if you have to expect good results? We need commitments, we need goodwill. I would like to say that we should create a platform for ACQF to exchange and to be mutually beneficial. And there should be some harmonization for credits that are to be allocated to each cycle of training for each country and for each region. So I'm saying that the African Union has a serious a heavy responsibility for its Commission on Education, and that they will have to include in their agenda of ACQF during the summit of the heads of states, with a view to providing directives and applying them as the needs, as is needful for each country. For me, we should necessarily maintain an organization of conferences and workshops, and for capacity building for the leaders in the national frameworks, the regional frameworks, in order to speak the same language. This is what I would like to share with you, Eduarda, with the other colleagues. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you very much for Professor Nkiema. Thank you for this proposal, very important one, that the African Union and the Commission will have to indeed include in their agenda of the process of this ACQF in the heads of states summits. This is an aspect of a political commitment. You've also underlined the commitment in at all levels with funding. And this indeed speaks about the idea of Madame Ida, who has also talked about for potential and essential funding. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Professor Nikiema. We now move on to Morocco. Monsieur Bakour, Dr. Bakour, or the director of ANEAC. We have worked a lot with you, Professor, and we would like to give you the floor. You are going to share your views, your major thoughts, your the lessons learned that you would like to share with us here. And so for question number one, please take the floor. Thank you, Eduarda, and thank you to everybody, my dear colleagues. Very quickly, for being given the floor, because we started with the 5 panelists. I think we are about 7 or 8. That's a very good thing. So we can have a look at the whole experiences. I'm not seeing the slide. I'm going to share it again. There was a slight flip. Yes. Now you are seeing it. Thank you, Dr. Bako. I'm of the opinion of almost everybody. This is a shared opinion. And so these are meetings that are very rich and instructive. Looking at cross-cutting looks, we did not limit ourselves to African experiences, but also we had a privilege of witnessing the presentations of European countries that are well known and that have started the experiment of a CNC for some years. We had Slovenia, we had France that made a presentation on its new CNC, which is less than 1 year. That is 2019, so that's highly enriching. Then it was a cross-cutting overview of the various systems of national qualifications framework for Africa and also for Europe. So it was a sharing of experiences. But then also what I retain in the debate is highly enriching. And so particularly we having a kind of a trilingualism, that is French, Portuguese, and English. This experience also, or experiment, is very enriching. Now for the second question. Can you please move on to the second question? Yeah. Right. Okay. There we are. We now need to move on to the higher speed, that is adoption or finalizing, adoption of the African Continental Framework as a reference framework for all the national certifications frameworks. And here I'm talking about we need to set up these national frameworks will have to be inspired in a sense of harmonizing and juxtaposing the various national frameworks, but we cannot go beyond the harmonization and comparisons, because talking about unification is utopia and that will be impossible. And so we look at the European space and we've not reached there for the training, etc. And so we should be a bit realistic on what we wish is that we should have harmonization and a kind of rapprochement. Even if you talk about levels, there are countries that are going to say, yes, yes, to 8 levels. Yeah, that's these are the tendencies of going through blocks, but everybody finds himself there, and so everybody will have to find himself in these various levels and the descriptors. We should get closer and to harmonize them. And also there are specifications and national specifications and regional as well. So we should keep these specifications, but the aim, the essential aim is to facilitate a mutual work on certifications. And I can say that there is this relationship that is triangular between quality assurance and national qualifications framework and the acknowledgement of diplomas. And so this is what we should have. And I think that for me personally, that was a very good experiment. And then we congratulate ourselves and we thank Eduarda in particular for this forum of exchanges and of a training between us and also by the states. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bakul. It's always a pleasure. You've always been with an open heart, and that is fundamental in this sharing. Dear Madam Fiona Ernesta Seychelles, we promise that we're going to visit you once COVID will allow us. So, dear Fiona.
And now you have the floor to share your contributions, your views about the main questions. Thank you so much. You have been always a permanent and attentive participant in all these webinars. Thank you, Fiona. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Eduarda. First of all, let me start by thanking Eduarda and everyone. We have lived the African experiences with the NQFs, and this has been highly enriching and invaluable. And I speak on behalf of my 2 colleagues as well that have followed the webinars very closely. Now, in terms of lessons learned, we see that in general, there is more awareness of the importance of a national qualifications framework. Countries have learned from each other while developing and implementing their respective NQF. For example, if I take Seychelles, in the early stages of development of the Seychelles NQF, there was close working collaboration with SQA and ACQF. And the Seychelles has learned and benefited from the South African experiences to date. The importance also, there is the importance of involvement of all stakeholders and partners nationally in the process of development of the NQF. I think we saw this throughout, this active involvement. Some main learnings, there have been mutual collaboration and exchanges between the countries, which have in turn contributed towards the development of individual countries' NQF and the building of capacity in the respective countries. Generally, the presentations indicated that countries are at 3 stages in the development of the NQF. experience level or full implementation stage, early development stage, and early thinkers. I like this one, early thinkers. The common will of all countries is to ensure transparency and portability of qualifications across countries and across borders. Hence, there is a willingness by all to have an NQF. We have also seen that most countries are using a credit system and notional learning hours, and this is very critical for portability of qualifications. And also recognition, of course. We have also learned, it's not there is a certain degree of trial and error with the development of and implementation of the NQF. Review is necessary in the light of lessons learned. What do I take to my institution? Seychelles is planning to review its NQF, and the cases presented in the P-Learning webinars have shed significant light on how we can approach this review to ensure that all types of qualifications are captured in our NQF, or that the new NQF makes provision for all types of qualifications. In other words, what we need is a more comprehensive and integrated NQF. We have also deepened and widened knowledge of NQFs of different countries, which will help us with the recognition and evaluation of qualifications of various countries. And also I add here, this is a step in the right direction in the implementation of the Addis Convention.
Yes.
How to disseminate and improve knowledge. We are proposing exchange between countries like what we have now, that can be continued at different levels to present new developments in the implementation of NQFs. And also, I think a platform is necessary for sharing of materials and for continued communication. Mm-hmm. Question 2, way forward. More standardization in terms of the number of levels of NQFs of countries in Africa. Ours that constitute a credit to facilitate alignment of NQFs, recognition and portability of qualifications, as well as mobility of workers and students. It could also be an advantage if regional qualifications frameworks could be set up for each region. I'm not sure all regions have a regional qualifications framework, so that countries in the regions could align their NQFs with their respective RQFs. In the second stage, RQFs could be aligned to continental qualifications framework. This would ensure portability of the qualifications, access, and so on and so forth. And also, more importantly, there would be mutual understanding of qualifications and qualifications framework, and mobility in Africa would be facilitated. Also, there should be a structure that makes it possible for exchange of expertise, networking, and capacity building for countries with less experience. And finally, I just wish to conclude with this. Expertise in Africa is in abundance. We have seen that, we have witnessed that. And we must capitalize on this to ensure that all countries in Africa are at the same level or have an NQF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for all your insights, for these excellent recommendations on the way forward as well, and this very strong appeal for the further, let's say, application and multiplication of African expertise. And this is what this project is also trying to do. Thank you. This is fundamental for the sustainability and way forward. And now we move to Cameroon. Dieudonné, would you like to share your views? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eduarda. I'm very happy to be part of this presentation. I will just start by giving out my impressions about the 7 pair learning webinars, and my impressions are very good. very, very good in the sense where we had the opportunity through an online activity to learn more and exchange on 22 cases. So 22 cases comprising 17 of national qualification framework and 5 from the regional qualification framework, be it European, South Asian, Arab, Southern Africa Development Community, and also the East African qualification framework. So I can say it was so enriching, collaborative, and also very intense. And I will also wish really to thank you for that. So we have learned a lot, and we are still learning. So from the learning now, the main learning that I can bring out from it is that I can say that the qualification framework are important. For the main conclusion, the qualification framework are important because it helps to structure and harmonize education and gives a better visibility in interaction between the different codes. Let me just take an example: the primary or the secondary, the higher and the tertiary. So they say when it is well done, so there's a structure, and then we also have a better visibility in order to have potential, I will not say product, but potential learners at the end of the training. And another learning is that developing and implementing a qualification framework require times. That's also what was learned from that. It required time. So we need to do it, to do the best, but also to take time to implement, to bring in stakeholders, to bring in discussion, and to bring in everybody. So it's just like a big boat where everybody is fine inside, and then we are moving towards the same objective. So the different stages of development, we have the case of Egypt that was presented by Professor Yuansen, who moved from since 2006. They took since 2006 to now. We also have the example of STADEC. So, and then what we can also say is that okay, we need strength to overcome the challenges, because through the different presentation we have seen that there were challenges, but they stood firm in it because they had a certain focus. So that's what we can also take into consideration. So a good strategy is needed in order to attain the aim, and it also gives a lot of opportunity, such as mobility, qualification, recognition of peer learning, capacity building, and the rest. So we could also mention the different level of qualification. So we show that the different level varies from one qualification to another. We have the example of Tunisia, who had 7, Capo Verde 8, and those are just examples. And then we also have certain qualification that goes to 10 level. So the purpose, which are diverse. About governance, it was done by national qualification authorities in Kenya, Mauritius, Zambia, and South Africa. So we also, so now to move on the next question, what do we take? What do you take? What do I take to my institution or department? I can just precise that Cameroon is still in the primary phase. So we are learning a lot. And what I can consider for the moment is that we need to implement a Cameroon national qualification framework. It's true that many things are put in place, but there's not yet, they are not yet very structured. So we really need to put everything in place in order to have a better visibility in terms of information, transparency, and structured education paths for a better qualified product which will ameliorate their mobility. The next question, how can we all continue to disseminate and improve this knowledge gathered through the contribution of representatives. So from my own point of view, it should be strongly considered during the next phase, because I'm sure that the process is not yet finished. So it should be strongly considered during the next phase of the work in order to put in place an ACQF that will have less problem seen on all sides, because we have seen that we have seen problem that is coming from the different NQF and RQF that was presented. So we should learn a lesson. We should learn a lesson from that. Okay, we should also work in collaboration and in complementary with the respective countries to enhance comparability, quality, and transparency of qualification from all subsectors and level of education and training, and support people living people's lifelong learning outcomes. Now for the last question was concerning the strategy, an important issue for the ACQF process. What is certain is that the national qualification should be at ease within the regional qualification framework and thus the continental. What does it mean? It means that things need to be harmonized. So when somebody from the regional or from the national qualification should see himself in regional qualification, so there should be, in summary, there should be an harmonization as my previous the previous panelists spoke of. And the most important too is politics, because sometimes you know that when things are put in place, if politics are not with us, it will be really difficult. So at the level of the African Union, we should look into consideration that politics should be part. And if politics is part, we can easily put it in place. And then also finance will also follow. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's what I have to do. But what I can say is that we learned a lot. We cannot bring everything now, but just a summary. Thank you, Eduarda.
Thank you very much, Dieudonné, for all these reflections, and also for talking about the role of the political leadership and coordination. Thank you. Now we have the two colleagues from Abdul Lahate Sissé from Senegal and Anak Sup. Abdul, are you here? Because he had some problem.
Oui, je suis là.
Voilà, Abdul. Merci beaucoup, Abdul, d'être là.
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much, Abdul, for being there and for being ready to share with us your major reflections and thoughts and suggestions in line with the question. I didn't prepare slides for you, but you should feel at ease for your 5 minutes of sharing. Thank you, Abdul. Yes, I'm going. I had sent you that, but that is no problem. I would start by thanking you for the various webinars that is involved, various linguistic regions and various institutional profiles. It was interesting because the national qualifications frameworks, the leaders and experts and delegations, but then it's the work of employers and everybody. And I think that the next webinars, all these stakeholders could also join us to bring in value additions to our thoughts. The lessons learned makes us say that if we, after having listened to all the countries and after having analyzed the various presentations, there are many more strategies that the countries will have to develop. There are some that are developing their national qualifications frameworks from initiatives and policies of their countries. Others work on a space that is much larger in terms of the region or the sub-region, So it becomes a sub-regional policies at a national level. But then some are also accompanied by technical partners, and so partners that are financial. And by listening also to and by analyzing the presentations, we realize that the countries are not at the same level in terms of development and implementation of national qualifications frameworks. Some are at the starting level, and so that's the reflection. And others are at the implementation level. Others have even entered have even entered serious reforms. That's what characterizes all the whole reforms that characterize the system. We have also observed that there is some work to do because in the majority of countries, we should include them in the national logic to be able to have an entity that helps them to be federated and unified in this sub-framework. We also have observed that the implementation of national frameworks of qualifications and certifications require resources and instruments. We have talked about the legal framework. We should also take uh, some laws and decrees that are appropriate to move the national framework. That requires human resources and also financial resources. And so the approach should not be mainly technical in terms of the development, but then it should be more holistic, and that requires several things at the same time. And that will enable one to arrive at a qualifications framework which gives approval. We've also realized that all the whole entirety of all the qualifications, principles, and values are very, very important. Consultation, the inclusive approach, participatory approach, transparency, and among others. These are principles and values that are extremely important to succeed in the qualifications framework. Other things that are very important and which we have seen is the existence of a good leadership and rigorous planning, and that was within the time. There are various actors in the countries, various considerations to take into account at the national level, at the regional level, at the continental level. This being an exercise that requires a good leadership and good planning. There are also challenges as quality assurance because we cannot talk about national qualifications framework without quality assurance. We also have other challenges that have appeared during presentations like taking into account validation of experiences acquired, long distance education, especially with COVID-19 that came afterwards. So these are the various lessons that we have learned from these various presentations. And now concerning the continuity of the work of this group and other stakeholders, it seems to me that it is important to continue in these exchanges and collaborations via a platform. It could be one platform or the other, like the way Madam Eduarda has managed this one. It helps to maintain contacts and to maintain exchanges. It seems to me also that it's important that in terms of all the COVID-19, all the presentations have proven that there's a need for pedagogic continuity, and so it needs more. We should think about transformation of our pedagogic models, and the transformation will certainly have an impact on the way that we ensure quality assurance and how we could have an impact on the national qualifications framework. This is prospects for us to be able to deepen the reflections by including this new dimension, which definitely will accompany the development of the dedication of information. Now, then cooperation between the various frameworks, national and regional and the continental. I think someone said it. It's fundamental to reinforce advocacy at all levels, be it continental, sub-regional, and countries, so as to create this drive to awareness creation to be able to go ahead. But it seems to me that this advocacy is also going to go by a dialogue, a sharing within the various skills. Some talked about instruments at a continental level, and we need a link that helps us to strengthen the instruments and the dialogues that are shared at the national, regional, or continental levels. But this collaboration cannot be done if we don't define clearly the roles and responsibilities at each level in the country, in the region, and in the continent. And that is going to enable us to get the objectives achieved. That's to develop frameworks that enable the harmonization, comparability of diplomas or certificates, and traceability so as to encourage mobility. And I think that the production of the directives or the major lines and regional directives, that will, and the networking will also help in the development of the expertise. I would like to end by the major lesson learned is that all these frameworks are indeed the tools or that we should indeed develop by taking into account the culture of qualitatively transforming our educational and training systems so that these frameworks will help us have a holistic vision and to guarantee pathways, and all other sub-regional frameworks or continental frameworks. This is a bit of what I retained through the 6 webinars that we have shared, all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul. I think that you have done a presentation or summary which is absolutely brilliant, I would say, with elements that where all the elements are linked up. And you also highlighted very important points. For instance, the follow-up of COVID-19 is not only pedagogic continuity, but also co-pedagogic transformation. And this transformation is going to have an impact, and then it was also going to have a kind of transformation with the national frameworks or qualification frameworks. It's very important for the future because we are thinking about ACQF, and that will be our new dimension. And thank you for having highlighted the issue of advocacy too, because I think that all the representatives of the countries from the various institutions or governmental institutions, you are indeed the people who can do this advocacy at the national level, at the regional level, and also at the Commission of the African Union. Thank you very much for this point also. I am going to see the contribution that you have sent, and I'm going to share it with all the participants. And once again, thank you, Mr. Sisi. And then finally, I would like to invite, if he's here, Dr. James Joey, who is also the person in charge of the area of education within the community of East Africa. James, are you here?
Yeah,
thank you
yes, okay.
so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And we have also your points in form of a slide, your 9 points. Thank you so much. The floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so where I am in the hotel, I had difficulties connecting, but I've followed quite a good chunk of the communication. And first of all, thanks so much, Eduarda, for organizing this. I've participated in most of the webinars, and it has been very useful. I'm coming behind everybody else who was in these last panel, and most of the things that I'm going.
The sound is broken a little bit. Can you try to stabilize perhaps your device, James? We don't hear you well.
Hear me well. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, James. It's a bit interrupted, difficult. Now we are not hearing you. Okay, James, since we have a problem of communication with you, let me then pass the floor.
Sorry.
Okay, okay. And then
I think I lost it, and now it's back. I come through. So I thought that this has been very useful in capacity building, and I take it together with my point number 2, which is sharing of experiences, which we have actually done across the different regions of the continent, and also getting experiences from beyond the continent, such as what has been presented by our colleagues on Europass, which is quite useful. So experience sharing and capacity building has been really great, a very good outcome of this initiative. And then awareness creation and advocacy on the essence of the key qualifications framework, which I've had running through the other presentations that have gone previously. And there is also the possibility of creating a network of experts. So there are so many experts who have participated in this. And from the Sierra Leone case, I noted the need for capacity building, where some countries which have capacities and other partners from elsewhere can assist not only Sierra Leone, but the different countries in areas where we have gaps and deficits through these community of experts and a critical mass that we can actually develop, not only to build capacity, but also to take this agenda forward. I think it would be important to retain this and expand this as a team that actually can enable us to grow this agenda forward and actually reach that continental level. There are identifiable similarities in the efforts being undertaken by the different countries, different levels of activity, which will relate to the other point that if at all you could go to the next point of the slide, which actually is quite useful, but will call for more need for coordination. There was calls in the previous discussions about harmonization, the needs for making these work together at the regional, national, and even the continental level, and also defining real roles and responsibilities, which I think the previous speaker made very clear. I think that is quite cardinal, the need for better coordination, coherence, and collective responsibility, and acknowledging that this is going on at different levels, but all these levels are important in different ways. And that definition or understanding of the different roles and played by the different levels would be quite important, and coordinating them so that there is coherence amongst them and allowing for the intended outcomes of this process. And I was quite happy to hear about the essence of this in promoting mobility of students, mobility of staff, and even further internationalization. Then the strengthening of the policy frameworks and relevant instruments to make this work, operationalizing this, and I think these two need to take place at the national levels, the regional level. Is going to
We don't hear you, James. Now
to
the
be
sound.
undertaken. So also for these later, so those that national will enable and articulate to the level to.
Okay. We lost you for a minute now, James. But I have the impression that you had already more or less concluded your points. In that case, allow me to thank you very much, James, for these 9 points. Very clear.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James, for coming back to again with an important contribution. You had presented the East Africa Qualifications Framework for Higher Education at the last webinar, and now your views on the 2 questions for this synthesis. Thank you so much, and good luck, good continuation with your very important work. And now we go to Tunis. On va à Tunis. Et c'est Monsieur Hassan, Monsieur Mustafa Hassan, qui va conclure ce panel. Monsieur Mustafa Hassan, nous sommes très ravis de vous écouter.
Oui.
Et donc, vous avez la parole, Monsieur Hassan, pour votre conclusion, votre synthèse finale, les 5 minutes que vous avez à votre disposition. Merci beaucoup, Tunisie, pour votre participation toujours très attentive. Merci.
Was very attentive. Thank you. Good morning to everybody. And so it's an honor for me to close with an attempt to close these deliberations. And sincerely, I had followed with rapt attention and participated in the various webinars. And I have my impressions, and I have some remarks concerning the horizons that this webinar, peer webinar, has enabled us to have for the future. And finally, I have recommendations. And first of all, this is an interactive webinar that has enabled us to bring out national frameworks to the regional frameworks, and to think about a continental framework. And so these deliberations and this interactive pedagogy, I have seized the opportunity to thank the organizing team of this webinar and of the show of professionalism that has enabled us to be attentive and to try to participate in all the webinars. And so the need is rather sending us to have or making us have a common understanding on the various frameworks and a common reading of the professions, be it in Africa in the future and equally in Europe. Because all these deliberations are leading us to objectives among which we have mobility of human manpower at a national level, or human resource. And also I've observed that we have deliberations at different levels of progress. And we have work that has advanced and those that are less advanced, and also to go onto the continental level. We should update all the national frameworks for us to be able to work on the same level and the same wavelength. And so what I'm proposing for my colleagues and my friends from various countries is that we're trying to, at a national level, to organize the workshops with our colleagues at the national level by having a technical support, probably through the experts on the national frameworks, so that we constitute a team at the national level. And today, this brings us to recommendations. And this requires a political commitment on the part of the African Union and also from each country for us to be able to work on a strategy that will enable us to go towards the implementation of a continental framework to ensure that the objectives are achieved. And equally, positive points that all the representatives of the countries have remarked that they end by having the idea that the implementation of a national continental framework will have to be based on good governance and equally on quality assurance, and then the security of data and accessibility to the databases. And also this remark helps me to even say that it is well appreciated, the intervention on what we call the Europass. And also we are called upon, and this is what we can see, a response to the what we call a digital approach, and also to have a database that's accessible and to have a good link on the degrees and on certifications, and also to avoid, if I can say, fraud, and also that will help us to work a lot more on digitalization of education. And by the same opportunity, I would say that in Tunisia, we are trying to, yesterday there had been a governmental decision on lockdown at the interrupted periods for the education and the higher education and the professional training, but on condition that we develop um, long distance education. The governments or departments concerned and national education and higher education, and equally the Department of Professional Training that has already started to work on the means to implement education and long distance education. And so this is what we can do to see the means that we have to make available for these departments to develop more on digital education. So our last remark or the request is that how can we have a technical support for the various countries on the setting up of this database. And if I can call on Mr. Excuse me, Mr. Dennis.
La dame qui a intervenu, c'est Idiko.
And Idiko Mazar. Yes. And so I thank him for his contribution and how can we develop practices that are similar, among others, to have a technical support that we could get organized through you, Madam Eduarda, for us to be able to go on to the same level. I'm not speaking for Tunisia, and to thank you very much also once again. Okay, and all the contributors and from this webinars. Thank you very much, Mr. Hatta, Mr. Mustafa Hassan, for your remarks. I want to highlight these last issues that concern the sharing, because the European Union on Europass, the database on edification, these various instruments that could be shared, and other technical aspects that could be shared with the countries of the African Union. Thank you very much. My colleagues, we have indeed come very close to the end, and I would like to just ask you a very last minute.
Pardon. Vous voyez, quand on travaille, quand on fait le teleworking, il y a des petites...
When we do teleworking, there are surprises. Now, I just want to come back once again to you for 2 minutes of the conclusion. And I once again share with you my screen. This is just to... So thank you very much, all you colleagues, for all that we've been able to do together and during these 7 webinars. I think I was the great beneficiary of all the knowledge which has been shared and discussed and created during these interactions, or these 7 interactions, and we've had a knowledge. There have been good contacts that have been established. There has been a new way of a trust that has been established among many of us, and so I just move on to some 2 minutes of interaction with you for the very last conclusions. So allow me to go into English.
Learning, so sharing for policy learning, not for policy borrowing. It's not possible to copy. I think this has been clearly said all the way. We will then need to continue disseminating the knowledge gathered through this first series of webinars. And I think that everybody agreed with us with this idea, and the 8 panelists have repeated this idea all the way. We will also need more experience and knowledge sharing at different levels, more advanced, more targeted, more on certain issues. We all agree that NQFs are a global phenomenon, that today we heard some idea that NQFs are instruments for respect and even for peace, for dialogue and for integration. I find this excellent. And of course, always the question, is there a faster way to develop and implement? Because we are in the new normal, things have changed, everything is in transformation, and the way forward from this COVID crisis will require creativity. I think everybody agreed with it, and Monsieur Cissé underlined very well, it's not only about continuité pédagogique, but it is about transformation pédagogique. So I'd like then just to mention a few next steps that we are thinking about in this project, developing the African Continental Qualifications Frameworks. First of all, we will be sending you appreciation certificates, so to speakers, to participants, and you can already start including them in your wallet, your Europass account, if you open one. We will have then further webinars of a more thematic focus until January 2021. Perhaps we are thinking about one on monitoring and review of NQFs, of national qualifications frameworks, and another one on qualifications databases. I think these are also two topics that have been considered quite important, or even by the panel today. We need to prepare a book, let's say, on this first ACQF peer learning program, like to really consolidate and make sense of all the knowledge that has been shared and created with you. Of course, we are preparing the next stage of this ACQF capacity development program. As I said, a bit more of a specific focus for the period 21-2022, preparing also the e-learning platform to support this ACQF network, organize then the actual network of trained experts who can then play the role of continuing and sustaining all these actions. We can also start planning and conducting capacity development actions with a very practical application and orientation, targeting certain countries or RECs, very much, let's say, on a demand basis in the period ahead. So thank you to all participants, to all our brilliant speakers, all these 22 cases that were shared here. We thank you so much to the interpretation team, John, Elio, Marie, Charles. Without them, we could have not done. They have really played an important role to create these bridges between the different parts, the different languages, the different countries and regions. Thank you very, very much. Thank you to the ETF Zoom team, Erika, Sylvia. Also thank you, of course, to ETF management, to my colleague, Johanna Anstey, who has been very, very actively involved in the production of the video that you saw this morning. Thank you to GIZ team, Darshana, Esete, Ernst. To the African Union Commission, HRST, you have noticed from the chat box that Emmanuel came online and he left all of you a very nice positive message of encouragement by the head of the Education and Youth Divisions of HRST African Union Commission. And naturally, thank you to the EU delegation to the African Union, especially to Mr. Aklilu Desta, who is the project manager who has been, who developed actually this wider project in which the ACQF component is included. So we will meet again, we will be sharing information, and we want to see Sierra Leone and NQF in 1 year to celebrate together. And many other qualifications frameworks, also in Guinea-Bissau, in Somalia, and Ghana. Ghana, we will come back to you, Maxwell, please, to continue the interaction. You made a very concrete plea when you did your presentation, and we will try really to give a hand as possible. Okay. And let us all stay together, continue the communication, stay safe. The world is very difficult. There are such difficult issues in our world, but yeah, we need to be able to solve them and to remain patient and continue. I wish all your countries stability, peace, and prosperity, and to the African continent as well. Beautiful, beautiful African continent. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a pleasure to be with you, to work with you. Thank you. And now let us, everybody, if you don't mind, open the cameras and we do a final family photo. Maxwell, I see you with a very beautiful shirt, Ghana. Will we make a family photo? Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. I see there are lots of chat notes. I'm so pleased to have met Julie Reddy. I heard a lot about you. Everybody, thank you so much. So let us make a wave and thank you. It was beautiful
Bye.
with you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We will miss you.
Thank you, Professor Johansson. Everybody, thank you, Jahu. Thank you,
everybody. Well done. Thank you.
Go to Seychelles.
Au revoir, Eduarda.
Au revoir.
Thank you. Keep in touch.
Kailash, we'll work together soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mrs. Gertrude Namubiro, let's keep in touch for curriculum development. Thank you.
Ok, merci. Merci tout le monde. Merci.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Muito obrigada. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada.
I'm grateful.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Stay beautiful. Thank you.
Let us keep in touch.